Good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, May 12th, 2021. This is the RSU 5 Board of Directors meeting. We are in the Freeport High School cafeteria. We have the full board participating tonight with Susanna and Michelle participating remotely. So I will call the roll just to confirm everyone can hear and be heard. Jeremy?
Present.
Candy?
Yes.
Lindsay?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Susanna?
Yes.
Angela?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Vali?
Yep.
Maddie?
Yes.
And Brady.
Yes.
Okay, and let's get started with I wanted to remind the board, we have a revised agenda in your purple folder, so just make sure you have that one, and let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, do I have consideration and approval, a motion for consideration and approval of minutes of April 28th, 2021 as presented, barring any errors or omissions? Vali and Beth? Any adjustments? Any online from anybody? Okay, all those in favor, I will call the roll. Candy?
Yes.
Lindsay?
Yes.
Jen? Susanna?
Yes.
Angela? Beth?
Yes.
I vote yes. Michelle?
Yes.
Vali?
Yes.
Maddie?
Yes.
Brady?
Yes.
Jeremy?
Yes.
Okay, great. It's unanimous. A lot of E ending names, I'm realizing. Okay, and no adjustments to the agenda?
No adjustment.
Okay, and item 6, good news and recognition report from the student representative Brady.
All right, the high school is entering its debatably the busiest part of their year. AP season and senior projects are starting, so the high school feels a little more empty sometimes with a lot of students leaving classes and going on. But it does signify the end of the year with only a month left, which has a lot to be excited about. The theater department's spring play is currently ready to be streamed on the Performing Arts website. And the baseball team has gone an impressive 7-0 to start their season and look to extend their streak Friday in a home game against Lake Region.
Very exciting, thank you so much. Okay, we are at our first public comment period. I'll look to Jen to see if we have anyone joining us online. We don't have anyone here in person. Okay, we do not. All right, well, there's another comment period toward the end of the agenda, and we'll also have an opportunity if anyone is watching YouTube and you have questions about the budget. We also have a specific dedicated public comment period for the budget coming up later in the agenda. Okay, and item 8, Becky, report from the superintendent.
Thank you. I have a few resignations to report tonight. Lori Medlin, the Accounts Payable Coordinator at the Central Office. Eric Whitaker, Freeport High School Math Teacher. Chris Kelly, Freeport High School Ed Tech. Christina Petrulli, Durham Community School Ed Tech. Kara Constantine, Freeport High School Science Teacher. And Kathy Britton at Mass Landing has decided to retire at the end of this year. And then this is not the board meeting for my full superintendent report, but I just have a couple of announcements to make. Today, Paige Fournier, Freeport Middle School Special Education Teacher, was announced as the Cumberland County Teacher of the Year. And so we had a small celebration for her at Freeport Middle School. This is very exciting. The next step will be that they'll reduce the finalists to like 8 of the 16. That'll happen in the summer. And then from those 8 finalists that are selected, there will be a state teacher of the year that will be announced in October. So we wish Paige all the best with that. We're very proud of her. We have decided to have a COVID clinic here at Freeport High School for students that will be open for students age 12 and older. I hope to get a communication out to families tomorrow, but it's going to be at May 21st at the high school, and then they will be back on June 11th to administer the second dose before the students' last day of school on the 15th. And then I just want to do a quick reminder that we're having our last Q&A with the superintendent, assistant superintendent, for parents or community members tomorrow from at 9 o'clock, and then we're having a staff one tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock. And that concludes my announcements. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Any questions? All right, we're at our next comment period for Q&A on the FY22 budget. So if we'll take any questions if there are folks online. Jen? Okay, all right, seeing none, we'll move on. No administrator reports, no board comments and committee reports, no policy review, no unfinished business. New business, item 14A, equity workshop, Carmen Ruland from MAC. And do we have her online, Jen? She is on. Okay, and the board has a printed copy of the presentation we'll be following along with as soon as the technology is up. I'll just take this opportunity to welcome Ms. Roland. And we're so pleased to have you here with us tonight and to participate in this presentation. And we hope it's okay if we, I was thinking we just ask questions as we go along, if that's all right with you.
Good evening, everyone. That is
and I'm sorry, we
perfectly-
just need a minute to be able to see you on our screen, on our big screen.
Oh,
So, sorry about that. Not right now, you're just a disembodied voice. Sorry, I should have told you. Hold on one second while we get our technology up.
okay.
Thank you. Okay, we can see you. Thanks so much.
Okay, I'm about to share my screen. Can you all, oops, did I share it? Let's see. There's share. Can you all see my presentation?
We can. We have a little bit of an echo. Just give us 1 second to figure that out. Okay, can you try talking? Oh, I can hear the echo just for myself. Testing. Oh, no echo from me. How about on your end, Carmen? Could you say something? Can you hear me? Oh,
Can hear you now.
do we still, oh, we still have an echo. Got it. Okay, no echo here. What about on your end, Carmen?
I don't hear an echo.
You sound great, so thanks for your patience. Thanks to our amazing tech team, and we'll let you go ahead. Thank you.
Of course, technology, I mean, it's Murphy's Law. Anything can happen. So good evening, everyone. I am Carmen Rowland. I'm pleased to be here with you all tonight to discuss equity and cultural responsiveness, cultural responsive practices and strategies for working with students and families in RSU 5. I am the Director of Programs and Delivery at the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium. I also serve as the Associate Director of the Center for Education Equity, which is an equity assistance center funded by the Department of Education to provide services to school districts and state education agencies and other organizations around access and creating access and opportunity for educational success for students and youth and children. Just a little bit about MAEC. We were founded in 1991 as an education nonprofit dedicated to increasing access to a high quality education for culturally, linguistically, and economically diverse learners. We envision a day when all students have equitable opportunities to learn and achieve at high levels. And our mission is to promote excellence and equity in education to achieve social justice. This is just a little bit more about the Center for Education Equity at MAC. Again, we are one of 4 regional equity assistance centers funded by the Department of Education. Our partners are WestEd and the American Institutes of Research, AIR, and we work together to improve and sustain the systemic capacity of public education to increase outcomes for students regardless of their race, gender, religion, and national origin. And you can see here our region in terms of Region 1, what that means in terms of Maine, all the way down the eastern seaboard over to West Virginia and Kentucky, as well as the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. And I just said this, so I'm not, this is more about our goals and the work that we do and how we become, working with other organizations. In terms of tonight, what I hope to do virtually with you all is establish a definition and shared understanding of equity, implicit bias, and culturally responsive education, explore the need for culturally responsive education, and identify the elements needed to engage with families in the community using an equitable, culturally responsive approach. Just some participation norms. This is definitely going to be an interactive, hopefully workshop as interactive as possible. I'd love to take questions from the floor as I go. Please speak your truth. I ask that you listen with respect, not just to me, but to each other. Stay engaged, embrace discomfort, disagree with respect and affirmation, maintain confidentiality as much as possible with the public viewing, and then make space, take space in terms of how engaged you are. And some of the assumptions I tend to operate from in doing this work is just when we all come together to discuss equity and the sensitive subject that it is, and in terms of racial equity and gender equity, is just coming to understanding that and assuming that we are all well-intentioned, good people who want to see all of our youth succeed in school, and that we all have valuable knowledge, expertise, and experiences and our own funds of knowledge to share with each other and the group. And just operating from a place of positivity. In terms of what to expect in the time that I have tonight is just, this is more workshop style, less lecture presentation, as much as possible, dialogue driven, and of course, critical thinking and reflection are part of this work as well. And reflection on who we are and how we came to be who we are, and the privilege that we have, the privilege that we don't have in the areas of, you know, our identities. And we'll talk more about that coming up. So what I like to do, and I don't, if this is not, you know, a good idea or a good way to do this, and we can skip it, but I'd love to just know who's in the room, who I'm talking to tonight. So if you could share your name, perhaps your role in the district or in the community, and the number of years you served on the school board, just to give me a sense of who's in the room and who I'm sharing space with tonight.
Sure.
Is that all? Can we do that?
Sounds good. I'll start. My name is Maura Pillsbury. I'm vice chair, and this is my 3rd year on the board. And then maybe we can go around the horseshoe, starting with Jeremy.
Yeah, my name is Jeremy Cluft. I going towards 6th year on the board, and just I think we're all involved in lots of things in the community. So.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Furtney. I'm in my, I think, coming towards the end of my 2nd year, and on the newly formed DEI committee that we have put together here.
Hi, my name is Beth Munson. I too am finishing my 2nd year on the school board. Yeah, I guess that's it.
I'm Brady Grogan. I'm the student rep, so I'm a student at the high school, and then this is my 1st year doing this on the school board.
My name is Vali Steverlink. I have been on the school board for, I believe, 7 years now, and have 3 children, one of who graduated from the high school, 2 who are still in the district. And I'm really, really looking forward to this presentation. Thank you for being here.
And I'm Becky Foley, the superintendent, and this is my 5th year in the district, and Cynthia Alexander is also here, but not at a mic, and it's also her 5th year in the district.
My name is Jennifer Galetta. I'm a school board member and a parent of two graduates and 1 left in the system, and I have been on the board for 4 years.
Hi, welcome. My name is Maddie Vertenten. This is my 4th year on the school board, and I'm also a parent. I have a 23-year-old who graduated from the high school, and I have a junior at the high school currently.
Hi, Carmen. My name is Angela King Horn, and I've been on the school board. I was appointed. I've been on for 5 months, and I have 3 children, and 1 who graduated, and 2 who are still at the high school. Thank you for being here.
I'm Candy DeSipkis, and I've been told I've been on the board the longest, but I really don't know how many years at this point, so I guess it's a while, and have been active with the policy and communication committees.
And our folks online, Michelle, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Hi, welcome, Carmen. My name is Michelle Richardson. I'm the current chair of the RSU 5 board. I have been on the board for, I just started my 9th year. And so Candy is definitely more than 9 because she was on the board when I got on. So I'm really looking forward to your presentation. Thanks so much for being with us.
And last but not least, Susanna.
Hello, I'm Susanna Hancock, and I'm in my 2nd year on the board and a former student in the district. And I'm also on the DEI committee where I met you back in January, I guess it was. So thank you for coming back.
Yes. Was that everyone?
That was.
Very
yeah.
nice to meet you. Very nice to meet you all. So I'd like to just go into this activity. Hopefully you all have cell phones or something that you can use to take a QR code take a picture of this QR code. And if that doesn't work, then we can just popcorn it around. But I'd like to know for you, from your perspective, this training will be successful if. This training will be successful if. Just take a few moments to think about that. And if you can let me know if you're not able to get to the QR code or it's not working for you, and we can just talk about it.
Sorry, we're working on it. We're trying to figure it out.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Mara, just for folks, if they haven't used those in the past, if you just open your camera and put the picture or the QR code in front of it, most phones will automatically pick up that it's a QR code and bring up a little window that you can click, and it'll open up the question.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Michelle.
So Carmen, there are two of us, two board members without phones. What do you recommend we do?
Well, would you like to just tell me what your thoughts are?
I'm not sure which thoughts, but yes, I'd be glad to tell you what my thoughts are.
Oh, yes. So the response would be to the question or the statement, this training will be successful if. And we have to, I don't know if you all are seeing my slide with the Mentimeter pulled up. Can you see that? Or are you looking at the actual PowerPoint? Let me stop sharing and then reshare.
Yep, now we can see you.
Okay, what about that?
Oh, yep, now we can see this training will be successful if. Yep, and those are folks' responses, right, that have typed them in already?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So maybe we can.
So I come away with a better. Somebody had a question?
Oh, I was just gonna say, folks are still typing, but we'll let you go ahead.
I just want to talk as they're coming in. I come away with a better understanding of my bias and how it impacts my thinking. I learned something new that will help as we do this work in the district. And if it gives us all the same language to work with, everyone is open and willing to listen to new ideas. We better understand what diversity means to RSU 5 and how our students and communities can benefit from the training. We have an understanding of equity and how we can help make our district more inclusive of all students. And I understand how this will work within the district. And then I learned something new and better, and I guess I have a better understanding of equity. So these are all great, and it seems like we're all in the right place together, and this is kind of what I had in mind tonight. I think so we can move forward. I just wanted to make sure we capture this and that you all also see what everyone is thinking as well. So we come away, there's this last one here. We come away with new understandings and are open to learning about our bias. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing and then pull back up the presentation. So if I do that. Okay. So let's dive right in. So I wanted to talk about equity to start, and we'll just move forward. So just in terms of equity work and what it means to do equity work in a district, in a school district or an organization, it's really focused on systems change by rethinking policies, procedures, practices, and structures, building an equity infrastructure that creates permanent spaces for schools and districts to address inequity, professional learning. It can look like professional learning, such as something like tonight, collecting and reviewing school data for civil rights, reviewing curriculum and instruction and making changes and adaptations to that, focusing on equity in terms of hiring and retention, focusing on professional culture and the culture of the organization. Do people feel like they belong? Same with school climate. Do people feel like they belong and they are, in terms of students and families, do they feel like they belong and are welcome and feel safe and that they can be them full selves in school? And then also examining discipline practices and disproportionality and discipline amongst students. So those are just some examples of what equity work, doing equity work looks like. And so I wanted to give that broad overview because that's some of the work that we've been doing with RSU 5, as you all may know, for almost a year now, I suppose, in this work. And please, as I'm going forward, please ask questions. You know, I'm happy to stop talking at all. So again, in terms of the plan, in terms of an equity task force or putting people together, I'm glad to hear that there's and know that there's a DEI committee that's really looking at this work and kind of leading the charge for the district. But there could be an equity officer or department, or like you said, an equity committee that looks at policy, looks at revising those policies and making any additions, tries to create and develop new spaces and structures that allow this work in terms of equity to flourish and grow. And in order to do that, you have to have understanding, right? And so that's why it's important to get that professional learning and ongoing professional learning as it relates to equity. In terms of a coordinating body, again, I just said the professional learning about equity and justice, doing cycles of study, plan, act, do, or rethink, reflect, classroom instruction and curriculum, again, taking a look at that, discipline, school and district climate, your work in family and community engagement and your initiatives and programs there. And then of course, looking at and examining staff, working conditions and culture. So equity is not just, about, students or just one sort of source of equity or racial equity. We're really looking at systems and thinking about organizational systems, but as well as individual people who play a role in the systems, right? And so with that being said, I have another QR code for you to talk about what does equity mean to you. So if you get your phones back out, or if you don't have a phone, if you want to just call it out, what does equity mean to you? And I promise this is the last one for the night.
So Carmen, when I click that one, I'm getting that same training be successful one again.
Yes, so am I.
Yeah, you know why that is? That's by design. It's because I have to flip the I have to change it. Thank you for saying that. All right. Okay. Did it work? Are you able to go to the next?
You are
code anymore.
You stopped sharing your screen, and I think the folks in person have it on paper so they can look at it. But Susanna and I were doing it off our computer screens, I think. So if it reshares, we should be able to.
No problems. Yep, this is the beauty of technology and having multiple windows open. Thank you for your flexibility and grace. So it should work now because I have the right one selected.
Yep, it does.
So it's so when it pops up, it says, what does equity mean to you? It says in one word. So if other folks whose phones aren't working want to say and one word that comes to mind, feel free.
So we have individuality, equal opportunity, respect, opportunity, again, fairness, equality. See, respect again, fairness, opportunity is becoming bigger in the word cloud. Balance, level the playing field. Respect now is becoming better or bigger, fairness. And I'll make sure to send this to you all so that you have it as an artifact when we finish tonight. So you can refer back to it. And that, you know, you can feel free, but the idea here is that you all are on the right page about what equity means. And so I'm gonna stop sharing this and get back to the presentation. All right. Okay, so you should see the presentation now. So in terms of educational equity, it occurs when every student has access to the resources and educational rigor they need at the right moment in their education, despite race, gender, ethnicity, language, disability, family background, or family income. And this particular document, Leading for Equity, comes from the Council of Chief State School Officers, and this is something that they released back in February of 2017. And since then, they've also released kind of other walking or crosswalk documents to help state education agencies in particular, since that's who they particularly work with, as well as school districts, kind of get a plan of implementation in place for operationalizing equity. And they provided 10 commitments that SCAs can act upon. And I can make sure that Cynthia, since you and I work very closely together, I can send this document to you and you can share it with everyone. But it's pretty helpful in terms of operationalizing, you know, what does equity mean? What does it look like? And what does it feel like? But we tend to use this definition at MAEC of educational equity. And so in doing this work, equity can play many roles. It can be seen as a nebulous or disconnected goal from other initiatives that you may have in your district and in your schools. Sometimes equity is seen as a standalone aspect of the educational system, again, disconnected. And then sometimes it becomes a focus area where, you know, that's the thing we're doing today, or that's the thing we're doing this year, and then we're gonna move away from it. But really, how we see equity and what we try as we're working with clients and school districts to improve outcomes for students and families, what we say is equity should be integral and infused in every aspect of the educational system. So that list that I showed before that had professional culture and discipline practices and policies and curriculum and hiring and all of that, equity should be a part of all of those many parts of your system and the way you think about making it come to life, really. And then in terms of quote unquote fixing the system, this is a graphic that was adapted from the Giving Tree, and it talks about the difference between inequality, equality, equity, and justice. And so we see there's a tree, and that first kind of left, the top box there, that is, we'll say that's an orange, in the orange grove, I guess. And there are two people there, two people, and the tree is just leaning to one side, and just without anything happening, because that system is leaning to one side, that person on the left is getting an orange without doing much. That orange is just falling off the tree. So that's unequal access to opportunities. And then equality, what we said was, oh, well, we have to do something, right? We have to make sure that everybody can at least reach the tree. So we've provided the tools and assistance necessary to reach the tree. Now, we haven't gotten the oranges yet, because the system is still bent, the tree is still bent to the side. And if you look at the placement of the oranges, they're still placed kind of skewed to the left, right? So that's equality. We giving everybody the same resource. Equity takes into account perhaps need done is giving folks the resources and tools that they need to address the inequality in terms of the resources and how it's in that tree. And so we've given folks, we've given the person on the right a taller ladder to help them reach the two apples or the two oranges rather that are on that right side of the tree. But if you look at the tree trunk, it's still bent, it's still leaning. And then with justice, which is where, this is an ongoing work, ongoing path here. Justice is really fixing the system. So if you look at that tree, there are now supports put in place. There are structures put in place to kind of help the tree stand upright. And also those oranges have been redistributed equally across in the tree so that the two people can access them, with at the same rate, I suppose. So we fixed the system to offer equal access to both tools and opportunities, and the height of the ladder is now equal. And so, there's the other graphic with the baseball field, and there's other graphics with books and different size people standing on books and things. But the idea behind all of this is just to take away that you identifying with equity, identifying the root causes of the inequities, and putting in place systems and practices and policies and procedures to help redistribute and make sure that folks get what they need, but always thinking about this from a systems perspective. Can I stop here and pause and just ask if there are any questions, any comments? What do you think about this?
I'm not seeing any, but I think this is a really powerful graphic, and I was noticing, in the justice square, which I haven't seen quite pictured in that way before. Oh, this is Maura, by the way. I don't know if you can see us.
I cannot see you, but thank you.
Okay. I was noticing, like you said, the tools, and I see it looks like cords or something changing the tree and the way the tree goes. So it's a very helpful visual tool.
Yes, and those, that's the, fixing the system. And I've heard folks say, well, instead of adding the cords, why don't we just chop the tree down, right? And just bulldoze the tree and start over. And sometimes, that's definitely what we want to be bulldozers for equity, meaning we want to, eradicate systems of oppression and all of that, and policies that disenfranchise or with unintended consequences for groups of students and families and even educators, right? But maybe that's not always the case, right? We may not be able to do that all at the same time right away. Any other comments before we move on? Well, we can always, I promise I'm not trying to rush through. But we can always come back to this if other comments or questions arise.
This is Lindsay, and I would just say, I think in the Justice Square as well, it's profound to see that not only have the ladders been added and the straightening of the tree, but the oranges had to be, new ones had to grow for there to be true justice. Like, we can't just put the props in place without making sure that there's actually oranges on the right side. So that's sort of profound too. Yeah, that's what I see in that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. I actually haven't heard that one before. That's a good, thank you. That's a good note. Yeah.
This is Maddie, and the other thing that strikes me is that we're a public school. So we operate within a public school system. And so there are of course, systemic things that we have no control over. And I think in many instances that becomes the reason why people think they can do nothing, because we can't cut down that tree. We don't own that tree, but we do have our little branch of the tree, and we can, you know, we can make the adjustments to our part of the tree or our part of the orchard if we can't bulldoze the whole thing and start from scratch.
And I think too, this work is done, equity work is done in partnership, right? So really to see true system change, identifying what are the other branches outside of the educational system. So what other community-based organizations or other agencies you all need to partner with and work with to ensure a full regional school unit 5 in the towns that comprise RSU 5. What needs to happen from that perspective as you think about, so that's a really good point as well, Maddie. Okay, I'm gonna press forward. So also, and I can make sure that you all have this article as well. Paul Gorski wrote an article around avoiding racial equity detours. And specifically, there's a deficit ideology detour that folks tend to say is that we have to do something to fix the students. We have an achievement gap. Oh man, there must be something wrong with the students because there's an achievement gap. But really thinking about fixing the system by eliminating conditions that marginalize students, which would cause such a gap to exist. So really thinking about the opportunity gap. And this is again connected to the previous slide. I'm talking about justice, and to Maddie's point about you all have one branch, right, of the tree perhaps, but what are the other branches doing, and what role do the other branches play perhaps in perpetuating opportunity gaps? And so that's just another thing, you know, to think about as well. What are those conditions that tend to marginalize students and families? And many times those are things that, you know, you might not be aware of, that things are happening that disenfranchise or marginalize groups of students and families. And there might be things that you know right off top that, you know, this is if we eliminated this one thing, that could do wonders for our student population and our community. So again, things to think about, you know, here on this one as well. And then again, in doing equity work, there tend to be 3 core tensions of equity work, and they have to do with, you know, now that you're in this and you know, you've been doing equity for a while, it's like, what should I do next? What are those concrete actionable steps that educators and that practitioners and school leaders and district leaders and school board members, what are those steps that you can take in your classrooms and your schools and your districts, and taking the ideas from tonight that really seem to be maybe out here and theoretical and abstract, and really thinking about what can you do? What are those actual steps? So we're going to talk about a few of them tonight. It's going to be tough to solve all of the things tonight in 45 minutes, but we're at least going to touch the surface and get those wheels turning. Do I really have enough power? So what is the structure of my organization or of my district? Do I have enough power where I sit, you know, individually, where I sit, to make a difference, to do something? Perhaps it needs to be a coalition of the willing. Maybe many of us need to come together to do something on equity. And so having those structures put in place, like I talked about before. And then personally thinking about, am I ready to engage in this work? What do I need to do? What books do I need to read? What conversations do I need to be engaged in? Perhaps what conferences do I need to attend? Perhaps we want to get a community of practice together where there are several of us in the district that are studying this, doing this work. But how can I successfully engage in issues of race and racism and equity in my classroom, in my school, in my sphere of influence? So those tend to be the 3 core tensions of equity work, and we like to identify those and name them because as tensions and as this work, this is not easy work, as you all know, but the first step in doing equity work is reflection and acknowledgement, right? And so we want to name these for you. And think about this, right? And think about where you might be with the do I know enough and what power do I have? So what we tend also to believe is that cultural responsiveness is a lever to achieving equity. And it's just one of many levers to achieving equity. And we like to start with this because there are concrete things that you could do to be culturally responsive and to create environments where students and families and educators and everyone within the system thrive as much as they can. And so cultural responsiveness, cultural competence is just a way of being. It's a mindset that affirms one's own culture while positively engaging with those whose cultures differ from their own. And so this is not just talking about race, right? This is talking about beliefs, values, practices, things that make up who we are, how we came to be. And so as culturally competent educators and practitioners and folks who work in school systems, such as all of you with the school board, we intentionally take into account the socio-political issues that affect students. And so that was, again, I'm just connecting the dots for you about the other slide we talked about with justice and the branches. What are the other branches, right? What else is going on in students' lives that we may need to consider as they come to school every day? What are the challenges? What are the successes, right? So we tend to take into account those issues and with students and their families. And then we really try and engage and commit to initiating change, transformative change in the way that we practice equity, practice cultural responsiveness, and the way that we make decisions, the policies that we have in place, why are they in place, right? Asking those questions about who is affected by the policies and practices, who's affected in a positive manner, who is affected in a not so positive manner, and why might that be? And why do we have them? Some policies are in place because they've always been in place. That's not necessarily a good reason to have them. So being culturally competent and culturally responsive is really thinking about the lived experiences and making meaning in the lives of children and families and improving educational experiences. Comments, I want to pause. It's comments, questions, reactions.
Hi, this is Beth. I have a question. As we talk about policies, and we are, regularly reviewing policies, and I know that you've done some policy work with the superintendent, and I'm just curious, what would be an example of a policy that would really harm someone? Because I feel like we try to make sure that they don't, but if there was, could you give me an example just so I could kind of have an idea?
Sure. We tend to start with our reviews with bullying and harassment policies, as well as the student code of conduct. And many times it's not necessarily the policy that is the issue, it's the way it's enacted, the way it's practiced. And we look for in policies any gaps or any oversight that may allow different groups of students to be treated differently. So if we take the student code of conduct or discipline policies, students treated differently for the same or similar infractions. And really looking at how policies spell out whatever training might be necessary and needed for anyone in the system who that policy applies to in terms of implementation. But that's typically where we start and look for and then who's included, right? And does the policy go enough to be stern and say, we take a stand against this, and these are the steps that we're taking, either in the regs, right? That is an example, I guess, of policies in place. Do you have a policy on educational equity and cultural responsiveness? That's another one that we look for. Do you have a policy around LGBTQIA plus and in creating safe and positive school climates for students? Typically, we look for districts to take those policy is the written word, right? So you can always go back to it, take those written, take those stances in terms of creating the environment that you want on the paper, and then making sure there's no oversight or no gaps in understanding and implementation, and writing that into it. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions here? Or anything else we've discussed so far?
Hi, Carmen. This is Michelle. Beth's question was interesting because I was thinking the same thing. You know, what could we potentially inadvertently have in our policies that are having, you know, implications that we didn't plan on, right? And reviewing those for how they apply and who they're meant to address. And you know, I think we try to do a good job of reviewing those and making sure that they're inclusive and comprehensive. But you know, your point of how they're actually implemented is really kind of where the rubber meets the road in my mind. Of, you know, we can have the best written policies ever, but if we're implementing them or you know, potentially doling out penalties differently based on a well-written policy, well, what's the point of a well-written policy? So it's an interesting thought to think about. You know, not only do we have to have great policies, but really understanding how they're being used, and that I think is a harder work, right? Because we can pull the policies and look at them, but we can't necessarily see how they look in action. So thanks for pointing that out.
And Michelle, to your point, and even thinking about maybe in some of this comes up in trainings, right? Because and that, you know, where people where they feel safe enough to say, oh, I didn't know that was what I was doing, or I didn't know that I was supposed to do this. And so trainings for, you know, educate. I mean, I you know, or your teaching staff or whoever, again, like I said, you know, who is whatever the policy is and who's responsible for the action within the policy. Another thing, to come away from those for a minute, some of the things that we don't tend to think of as policies, and I know this came up in the training I did for one of your professional development days in March, but and I use this example, but the policy around paying for field trips, right? And that's not a policy and say a board policy, but that's still a practice that without even thinking of hurting students or causing harm, there may be families that cannot afford to, you know, pay for students to go attend field trips, right? And so, I mean, that takes some budgeting and some other work happening in the background to make it so that families don't have to pay, or there's money to cover families who can't afford to pay for their children to go on field trips, or looking at attendance policies. And if students are experiencing hardships, or if a family is experiencing homelessness and the student has to go to school across county or across district and they don't have transportation and they are tardy or late to school, well, yes, they're tardy and late to school, but look at what's happening, you know, because, like, why are they late? What's the reason behind that? And should they really get the tardy? I mean, these are all things, again, that are examples of, yes, you have the black and white, but also think about it from a culturally competent, culturally responsive lens and what's actually happening in the lives of students. So hopefully that helps a little bit too to unpack what we're talking about with practices and policies.
Karen, this is Maddie again, and I'm looking back at the 3 core tensions. And the second one, do I really have enough power? And I think as a school board, we have to extend that beyond ourselves as board members, and we have to think about, do we have a culture where students and staff feel empowered? You know, because in the examples we were just talking about, you know, how policy is enacted, you know, sometimes, you know, people want to follow the letter of the law. They're trying to follow the letter of the law, and they don't necessarily feel empowered when they know, for example, about the student, the example you just shared of a student who has, you know, has serious problems getting to school on time, you know, so that's an extreme example. I hope that would not happen, but it could potentially. So I think that's important for us to consider is power, and is the culture in all of our schools and our community a place where administrators and students feel empowered to speak and share their situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, and it takes conversations like this, and I'm sure there have been other discussions and conversations where you kind of unearth some of that, and you just take it step at a time. You just one step at a time and take one thing at a time to really kind of walk it through and really think through, you know, all of the different facets of an issue and how you might address it from an equitable or culturally responsive viewpoint. All right. How am I doing on time? Can I do a time check? Is that okay?
I think that you're good. I'm sorry, I did not note when we started, but I think we're doing okay.
Okay. All right. Just tell me to be quiet whenever I've run out of time. And I can always come back if that's okay. So again, just going back to this concept of culture, and you know, we're not going to spend a whole bunch of time here because I want to get to implicit bias, but you know, just thinking about the surface line, right? And this is the iceberg concept. So there's maybe 20% of what we really know about each other, what we can see above the surface line, and what we think we know about families and students and what they bring to the classrooms. We don't know as much really as we think we do. That's in relationships. And this is going to lead us into the implicit bias portion of the training tonight. But just keep in mind, right? There are many things that you may know about each other on the school board, but there are a lot of things that are hidden below the surface, well below the surface. And anytime we're interacting with a student or a family or a colleague, it's important to really keep that in mind. You don't know what people are bringing to the table, what experiences that they had, how they grew up, where they grew, unless they share, right? Unless they share this with you. It's not something that's automatic. And really thinking about culture and cultural responsiveness and cultural competence and all, it really is thinking about this lens here of the iceberg. And so here is the iceberg, perhaps in a different way, but really people's experiences really shape their values and beliefs and assumptions. But then our experiences may be shaped or may shape our religion, gender, education level, our personality, our class level in terms of socioeconomic status, our ethnicity or race, and our age. So all of those things kind of work together in a bidirectional way to influence our experiences, which really shape who we are, how we came to be, and the beliefs, assumptions, and values that we have. So it's just important really as we think about culture and cultural competence, what's at the base of this, right? It's not, again, culture does not always mean race. It means a lot of these things here. And just for another example, to talk about culture and experiences, you know, what are we really talking about, right? We're talking about, it could be your career, your work background, your income level, your marital status or family status, if you had military experience, your religious beliefs, your geographic location now and when you grew up, your parental status, meaning are you a parent? Again, your education, and of course, in that the diversity wheel in the middle, thinking about, again, your sexual orientation, your age, race, ethnicity, gender identity, your physical abilities, and qualities. All of these things, you know, make up who we are, and, you know, we are socialized to behave according to certain traditions that have been established over generations and things that have been passed on to us from our families, our parents, our communities, loved ones, mentors, you name it, right? They all tend to make up who we are and how we engage with others in the world. And this is again, just, you know, the social identity wheel, and again, thinking about how we are socialized, and this all, again, is the same. So I'll go ahead and move forward on this. But again, I just want to, before I move forward, the point here is that, and again, privilege, we're talking about privilege too, is that any of these things make up who we are. And at any point, any of these social identities or may become more salient, or more kind of top of mind for us, depending on the situation or the context that we are in. So I want to say that, and we could all have privilege in any number of these areas, right? If you think about language spoken, well, in America, English is the predominant language, right? That's everything we do is in English. And so regardless of your race, your gender, your class, if you speak English, you have privilege there. We don't think of privilege in that way, but that is an example. Same thing with religion. Christianity is the predominant religion, and there's other religions, and I'm not saying it's dominant, it's predominant. So I just want to make sure that's clear. There are other religions, right? But if you practice Christianity in any number of the forms that it exists, then you have privilege in that area, right? And so it's just something really to reflect on and think about in our society, how we all show up, right? And the identities that we bring with us to schools, to classrooms, to work, to school board meetings, all of that, when we're interacting with folks. And then in terms of actions and how do you become culturally competent and how do you engage in culturally competent practices, we have a acronym called REACH OUT, which literally, you know, for cultural competence, it really fits, reach out, relate to others with mutual regard, eliminate barriers to positive growth, agree to disagree without judgment, consider the lived realities of others, help those that challenge you, offer positive alternatives, understand other viewpoint or other points of view, and take time to model growth through conflict. And so I just ask you all just to reflect right now and maybe just choose one that you'd like to take with you and practice and adopt. Which one of these speaks to you? Which one might you want to practice and adopt? And if you feel like you want to share, I'm glad to hear your voices here.
Hi, this is Beth again. And I would choose probably help those that challenge you, only because I think that would be really hard for me, because I think some of the others I feel like I at least am aware and try to do, as far as like relate to others with mutual regard, agree to disagree without judgment. I try to do some of those already, but the help those that challenge you seems like a really difficult one to figure out.
This is Maddie, and sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Yes.
I like to take time to model growth through conflict. I mean, I don't like it. It's not fun, but I mean, that is quite literally in conflict situations, pausing, hearing, listening, slowing down, really difficult to implement, especially I think in groups, but can be very constructive.
Yeah, I like to say those two, the help those that challenge you and take time to model growth through conflict. That takes a sort of almost emotional intelligence, almost, right? To really think about how do you do that, right? Because it's not second nature to help people who challenge you, or when you're experiencing conflict, to pause, listen, reflect. That takes practice. Michelle, you had your mic off. Did you want to share, or are you good?
She did.
They took mine.
Oh.
No, those were the two that spoke to me as well. I mean, I think as a board, we kind of have our own norms and expectations for how we work as a group. And I'm happy to see that a lot of these line up with those norms. So that's good. I'm glad. And maybe we could add a few more. If I had to pick another, I think the eliminating barriers would be another one that sort of speaks to me as, a place to spend some time and try and get better. I think barriers are easy scapegoats to why we aren't getting better and learning. So that'd be the one I'd take on, I guess.
Carmen, this is Jen, and Maddie took the one that I would have said, because I think that's a good one. But looking over this list, the one that kind of now jumped out at me was the agree to disagree without judgment. And I think the agree to disagree part is really easy, and people superficially say that all the time. Okay, we can agree to disagree. But I think a lot of times people walk away and probably both sides have judgment. So I think that's a really, I think that's one that would be really good to work on, because I think people get the agree to disagree part. It's the second part that's I think it's easy to walk away and just say we disagree, but not to put some judgment on it. Well, we disagree, but I still think your idea is terrible, or something like that. Because I think we've all done that.
Yeah. Yep. I'm gonna agree to disagree, but I don't agree. Yeah. Yep. Yes. So you all, I believe, have this, and I can make sure that you have it as a handout as well. We do have it in handout form. You can post it in your offices or, on your refrigerator or whatever, but it's just, just something, another way to think about how do you actually enact, this work and come from a culturally competent perspective. So I want to move on to implicit bias. And do I have any psych majors in the house, psychology majors at all? This is all about the brain. So we're going to take a trip down neuroscience lane just for a moment. So the human brain and bias. So the human brain, or the human mind, takes in about 11 million bits of information every second, but is consciously aware of only 40 bits of information. And so I always start off with the implicit bias segment in saying that we all have biases. That is, so everybody has it because we all have brains. Our brains are trying to make shortcuts so that we can help make sense of the information that we're taking in, right? So we take mental shortcuts in processing, information processing, to help us be able to make decisions, take actions, in those split seconds that all of this is happening. So an implicit bias is a preference for or prejudice against a person or a group of people. And it typically leads to, or can lead to, certain decisions being made if they go unchecked, or certain attitudes. So this here is the Anti-Defamation League's pyramid of hate. And this starts off with biased attitudes, so stereotyping, insensitive remarks, fear of differences, microaggressions, screening out positive information, justifying biases by seeking out like-minded people. All of those things are biased attitudes, right? So this is implicit bias. And if left unchecked, if we hear them and we don't do anything to stop them, they literally can lead to acts of bias, such as bullying, ridicule, name calling, slurs, social avoidance, dehumanization, biased jokes. And if that goes unchecked, it can lead into discrimination. And we can see this in terms of economic discrimination, political discrimination, educational discrimination, employment discrimination, housing discrimination, criminal justice, and so on and so forth, which are our systems, right? That's at the systems level and practice level. And then if that really goes unchecked, then that could lead to bias motivated violence, such as murder, rape, assault, arson, terrorism, vandalism, desecration, and threats, right? So we go from the attitudes and the stereotyping and insensitive remarks and the implicit bias to now a hate-based violence or bias-motivated violence. And then if that is left unchecked, then we see a systematically annihilation of an entire group of people with genocide. And so it's really important when I'm working with students and when I work with schools, I always start off with something like this to really get people to think about the words that we say matter, our thoughts matter, and the trick to implicit bias is really acknowledging that it exists and being aware of where it shows up in our work and in the language that we use. There's a book called School Talk that's written by Mika Pollock. And in that book, she talks about literally the language that we use when making decisions about students and when discussing students and families and how it matters. And so that, I spend a little time talking about this pyramid of hate because very quickly, it's almost like the ladder of inference. We can go up the ladder or go up the pyramid without even realizing that's what we're doing. And realizing people think, oh, it's just, that was just a little joke. It didn't mean anything. I didn't mean anything by it. However, you don't know the connections, right, to going up that pyramid. So feedback, comments here. Have you heard of this before?
I just have a question, Carmen. Looking at this, the chart, I'm assuming it can skip around because I feel like one of the things that really I think about is that a lot of people kind of go from the biased attitudes to the discrimination without that kind of middle part. And I think that that's sort of what a lot of people sort of use as an excuse is that, well, I don't do any of this name calling, any of that stuff. So that makes it, not makes it okay, but that excludes me from being part of the problem, right? If we just kind of skip to, from an attitude and right into discrimination or even being unaware of moving from one, an attitude to discrimination.
Yes, no, that's totally true. You're talking about, covert versus overt, right? Something that's a little bit more under what we think right? It might be kind of under the radar, but it tends to show up. So, yes, if we don't see the bullying or the ridicule, a lot of times in my work with schools, like, oh, we don't really have bullying. We don't have any bullying problems. But then you go talk to students or you really start looking at things. It's like, actually, there's stuff. And you need to pay attention. There's a culture here. There's something that's allowing that's not, everything's not, okay, so yes, that's a great point. I don't know who that was speaking, but that's a very great point that you made about this.
This is Maddie again. I'm sorry I'm talking so much, but I had to speak on this one, as I'm sure many of us have connections, but I have, the reason I'm in this country is because my grandmother escaped a genocide in Germany. And I think Jen's point is such a good one because I think so many Germans today carry this burden of guilt, not because they didn't recognize their own bias, and they when you're introducing this, they say, you said if it goes unchecked, and so even when people have this implicit bias and they may not recognize it in themselves, it allows them to not recognize it in others, and so it escalates. And they think, well, it's not me. I don't feel that way. And it continues to escalate and ended up where it did. I think this is really profound. I'd love to see this in every history classroom.
Hi, this is Beth again. Oh, sorry. I have never seen this pyramid before, and I'm really grateful for you to include it because it's really telling in many ways. So I just want to say thanks for that.
This is Lindsay.
You're very welcome. And I'll make sure there are a resource on the website that goes with this. So I'll make sure again that this gets to you all as well.
This is Lindsay. Like Beth and a couple of others, I have never seen this before, but it's powerful. And I think the two things that stand out to me as I see it is in the red in the genocide. The note that I have beside that is the history of our country. That is how our country began, not for the indigenous, which Maine has an indigenous population, but that we are based on genocide, so that stands out for me as our history. And 2 down in orange, we're living this out today. So I see that as our present for many BIPOC folks. And so I very much see America represented in this. So it's a powerful tool. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Hi, Carmen. This is Michelle. So I just have a question, because for me, the mental jump from that implicit bias slide about, our brains all do this automatically, right? So when I look at this, powerful pyramid, I almost see that there's something below the blue, right? Like, because everything on here, I mean, there's nothing good on this pyramid, right? But when we're saying that everyone has some bias from where they start because their brain automatically start, like, that is sort of I don't know if it's possible to, I mean, obviously you can change how you act on it, right? And recognizing it and, veering off the path of the pyramid. But, I almost feel like there should be, sort of something underneath those negative attitudes where you can see, like, hey, this is where we start, and here's your chance to jump off the pyramid. So.
No, that's a great point, right? That's a really great point. Yeah, because we don't typically start at the bias attitudes. It's literally, and that's why I said it's always, we have implicit bias, we have biases. Again, it's just because we have brains, right? That's how our brain operates, but it's what you do with them and acknowledging that they exist. And what I like to do is go to this next slide and kind of talk through some scenarios. And when we think about labeling students, typically, well, no, I shouldn't say typically. When we think about labeling students, perhaps we do so because we're trying to help, right? But what might be a category or label that may be used inaccurately in a school, or in your school district, that represents the entire child, but really it's distorting the rest of the child, right? And we don't typically see the rest of the child. So we have labels all the time because a child or a student may have done something, may have had a discipline infraction, and it's kind of hard for them to get from under that negative label, if you will. What are those labels, right? Because this goes into implicit bias. What are those labels? And then how can we not use those labels? What are some of those common labels that we hear about students?
This is Maura. I think that's a great question. One I recently heard was shifting from using at risk to underserved. And I thought that was powerful because it focuses on the system and how it serves the students as opposed to the student somehow having a shortcoming.
Right, and our labels lead to action, right? So if we're thinking about at risk, we're going to be coming from a deficit mindset of what you just said, right? What's wrong with the student? How can we fix the student? Versus underserved. That's a different page in a book, or different books.
So this is Jen. I was just kind of thinking this is kind of a huge one, but I mean, we still identify that we have a special education department, which special obviously has, different meanings to different people, but it identifies them as special, which could also mean, different, not included, part of the so that's an interesting one.
It is, right? Because hopefully students are identified so they can receive the appropriate services they need to access the curriculum and be successful in school. But also, right, if we are thinking about a student or a child with a disability, we may be thinking of them that they can't do things, and maybe we leave them out of opportunities or other things, right? So it's all about how you view them. But sometimes we have labels like those kids who live over there, right? Those kids who live in that town are over there. or the jocks or the athletes or the band kids. I mean, there's, you know, it doesn't have to be all negative, but when you're doing that, there's action. The point of this slide really is I want you to understand that there's action that comes with labels, right? And so how we label students, how we talk about youth and students and families matters. Is there another point here, another label anyone wants to discuss?
I wanted to offer, you know, instead of special ed kids, we could refer to neuroatypical learners, because that just invites a whole conversation about all different ways that people learn, and with more respect.
Absolutely, absolutely. So again, this is something else to think about, and you know, and keep coming back to in terms of when we're making decisions, how are we making those decisions, and what are they based on in terms of students and families. And labels can be helpful. I mean, we, you know, again, going back to our brains, we categorize and use labels to help us, you know, make decisions and access information quickly, but also we have to be aware of which labels we're using. So just in terms of developing cultural competency and the approaches that we use, we're always learning more. And as culturally responsive educators and those who are working on behalf of students and families, we're assessing our own prejudices and biases, and we're learning to know reality from a variety of perspectives. And this is a cultural competence continuum, excuse me. And the point of this is just to say that in any given scenario, any given situation, you could be practicing any one of these, right? But the goal, cultural bias, which is we all, again, we've been talking about this, we all have this, and our experiences inform our sensibilities and our biases. And we are striving for cultural relevance, cultural competence, and finally, cultural intelligence. And it's a continuum, meaning we could be anywhere on this, but the goal is to strive towards cultural intelligence, where we're making an ongoing effort to generate and realize the potential, the innovative potential, excuse me, of culturally rich and welcoming environments. And so establishing those environments to support and help our youth and our families and each other to build the type of school systems and programs that we want to have and that really everyone can thrive in. And I also have this available as a handout as well that I can send over to you all as well. And then here's just some quotes to kind of help us unpackage again and make this all come to life. Here's one: we don't see things as they are, rather we see things as we are. And so thinking about that and what that means to you and what you might have to do to come out of that. And then we need to learn to see people from the perspectives of their lived experiences. So to say that this is not automatic, this takes training, this takes having time and putting forth effort to really learn to see people from the perspectives of their lived experiences. And then education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. So constantly bettering ourselves and improving our knowledge, in this case, again, connecting the dots back to the tension slide about what do I know and am I ready to do this work, educating ourselves and working together to build that coalition of the willing that can really do this work and really establish the types of environments, again, as I said, that you would like to establish for families and children. And so then in terms of like kind of how do you do this, right? So just some next steps. Again, there are many, many more, but cultivating and nurturing the capacity to welcome a diverse school community. And you can do that by the reach out and by some of the other things I've shared, affirming the value that diversity brings and really kind of internalizing that thought and thinking about that, thinking that through, and expanding opportunities for authentic family, school, and community engagement And so really reflecting upon where are your families? Where are they? Do they have seats at the table? Are they a part of decision-making bodies? Are they a part of the work that you all are doing to move forward diversity, equity, and inclusion in your district, and so on and so forth? So where are your families, and have you created school environments and school systems that families want to show up to? Or are you showing up to where they are, right? Because as we know, with culturally responsive family engagement, it's not always about families coming to the schools and to the buildings. And again, that's another training, another topic for another time, but I want to get that in there. Okay, I think I might have lied. I do have one more, but this is an evaluation. I'm done with the training, no more Mentimeters and polls. This one literally is a end of training survey that I have to do so that we can kind of get metrics on how we are at MAC performing with our trainings, and any improvements that I need to make, anything that you thought was missing from tonight, and hopefully you all can access that. If you cannot access this QR code, I do have a link that I can share with Cynthia, and Cynthia, hopefully you can get that to folks, and I'll make sure to send that to you this evening. But this helps us with just following up and making sure that we're improving.
Thank you, Carmen. It looks like that might take a few minutes to complete. So would folks like to have the link to do it later? Is that, or, okay, great. All right, well, that was fantastic. Oh, do you have more, Carmen? I'll let you finish up.
I was just going to say, I just have some references here, but I think you all have the printout, the handout. So the references are there in the handout as well. And this is just my contact information. Should you have any questions or want to follow up on anything. But thank you so much. I appreciate the questions and the conversation this evening. And again, if there's anything I missed or said, please follow up with me.
Thank you so much. This was a lot of really, really great information. And I have to say personally, a lot of things that I've heard about, but maybe learning more about for the first time. So thank you for helping us further our learning. Did folks have any other questions? Jeremy?
And it's kind of a large one in general, but I do wonder within our district, what sort of work can we do to identify the diversity that's there in order to kind of cultivate it, but also, my gut tells me that economic diversity is probably not focused on enough as something that the adults and the kids too could relate to better. Because if we look around our school board here, we're, as far as I know, extremely privileged, if you will. So how do we get those, other points of view in so we're not tunnel visioned in that? And I wonder, is economic diversity the way to help all of our communities understand the importance of overall diversity, something along those lines too, as a way to say, this really is important, even if, percentages of black and brown in our towns is quite low. The diversity as a core value, looking at some of these quotes, which are fantastic quotes, does it help to open up your eyes to overall diversity too? And I wonder how much that's been included in the DEI discussions so far.
I'll just say quickly, absolutely, to your point, and that's why I was making the being intentional about the language I was using in talking about privilege and culture, because it's, again, race and racial equity and racial injustice and social justice is very, very important in terms of the history of our country, and what I forget who mentioned it when we were talking about the pyramid, but also diversity in economics and socioeconomic status plays a role, and that's something that should be examined and be a part of any DEI work in school systems and in any system, thinking about privilege in that regard, and equity and inequities in that regard. And I think, in RSU 5, there seems to be a vast, kind of range of socioeconomic status, and really thinking about how do you pull that out. So I know you all are aware of this, but we've done some focus groups, and that has come up in the focus groups that we conducted, and just in our discussions, with folks, that seems to be something that your community wants to focus on, and thinking about with diversity in terms of socioeconomic status, the community asset mapping, like what are those needs, and doing a needs assessment from that view. What might be areas of concern, what might be areas of support to offer to families who may be in a lower income bracket, or may be experiencing hardships as it relates to SES. So hopefully I answered your question, Jeremy.
It does. Thank you very much.
So Carmen, this is Vali, and I really thank you for this presentation. Very, very thought-provoking. Now, before you go, I'm thinking about, okay, how do we implement this? There's so much to implement. So I'm just going into one little silo where I can probably wrap my mind around these big ideas. But in thinking about policy and how we practice the policies and how we implement them, I mean, it's obvious based on what we just heard that there needs to be a lot of room for flexibility and for making exceptions. So, for example, we have, say, practice that we say that unless students have a certain GPA, they are allowed or they're not allowed to participate in extracurricular activities and sports. So we have obviously a huge range of situations where students may or may not have the ability to meet that target, mostly based on family circumstances. So if we are going to be making exceptions for the students who deserve those exceptions because they're underserved, how do we protect their privacy and at the same time allow principals and decision makers in the school buildings to be able to act fairly but not be questioned maybe by other students about the fairness of their decisions?
Before I answer, I just wanted to say, I know that the superintendent is there, and just ask about any policies around privacy and student privacy and what might already be in place to support students in that way.
Well, we definitely have, FERPAs in place, so of course you can't talk about it, but I think Valley brings up a great point about how kids know a lot more than we think they know, right? Or students share things like, well, I didn't have these assignments in, but, an exception was made for me. So I think that's the difficulty. I mean, the teachers aren't going to go out there and say something like that because we do have things in place that prevent that from happening. But the reality is, a lot of information gets out there just from student to student or parent to parent. So I think, it goes back to the giving tree analogy that, it doesn't mean that justice means the same for all. And a lot of times I think parents want to know when this happens, if there's hate speech, what is the consequence? And I think for a lot of people, they want it very concrete, that they want to hear that we do the exact same thing. But there's so many, I think when you're really trying to create a just system, there's a lot of things you have to look at when a student does something. You have to look at the age of the child, the ability of the child, how many times has this happened before, so it's never as black and white as some would hope for. But I think that when you have a truly just system, that it's very flexible and individualized.
Thank you. And just to add to that, and I also think if your community members and parents and families and the students, if they can trust that that you do what you say you're going to do, and that you are making the best or providing the most possible or the best possible outcome or action for a student based on their circumstances. And I think where we kind of get into the sticky areas is if not everybody gets that same benefit of the doubt, right? And that's where folks start to ask questions, and that's why they want to know, what happened, because, and then again, people don't know, they're not operating with all of the information. But I think that's where it starts to get down a kind of a sticky path when everybody does not get the same or not the same, get benefit of the doubt, however that looks for the situation.
All right, any other questions? Any folks online having? All right, I'd just like to say thank you again so much, Carmen. I know we took more of your time than we were supposed to, and thank you for the expertise and knowledge that you shared with us tonight. We're deeply grateful.
Thank you. I was going to say, I think I took more of your time than I was supposed to. So thank you for allowing me to go a little bit over. And I'm happy to come back and go deeper. Obviously, this was not a full in-depth training, so I'm happy to come back, and thank you for having me, and thank you for the invitation. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Okay. A lot of great information. Do we need to do anything to get change anything with our technology before we move forward on it? Okay. Okay. All right. 14B, consideration and approval of the comprehensive education plan.
Do you want to do the motion first, Mara?
Sure. Do I have a motion for consideration and approval of the comprehensive education plan? Bali and Lindsay.
Good evening. So in the pink item 14B, there's the memo. This is something that I do annually. I think everybody was here last year except maybe Angela, right? So this is something we do every year, and I have the comprehensive education plan that every district has to have, and it's in my office. It's housed there. And so annually, I update it. Sometimes I'll do it every couple of months, and sometimes not. But then, so we go through, there's several sections. There's over like 20 different sections, and we go through and make sure everything is updated. And so the list that you see below, thank you, Vali. She's gone. Oh, no, she's right there. She had suggested this a few years ago that we just itemize them out. And so under the personnel plan, last year, when we had this memo last year, it was in May, and in June is when we went through the educational professional growth and evaluation handbook for our educators. And so that's why I put it in here, because it wasn't, it was added, but added after we met last time. Since then, we've also done the bus driver and custodian and head custodian evaluation handbook and the school nutrition employee evaluation handbook. And so those are all updated in the plan and on the website. Under the affirmative action, you can see all of these are policies listed that fall under the affirmative action plan and the dates that those were board adopted. And then the local assessment system, same as the first item. We did this in June after we had already adopted, and that was that IKF, that graduation requirements. Remember, we changed the credit amount required. And then lastly, the plan for the use of SF funds. So those are the Title I, Title II funds, and every year that gets updated, and there's a new grant every year, and then that's just put into the comprehensive education plan. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, I will, oh, sorry, Valerie.
Not a question, a comment. Thank
Yes.
you so much for doing this. Now I don't have to think about it. Oh, should I go and look at that enormous book? I don't have to do that. It's all in here. Thanks.
You're
Yes.
welcome.
Great summary, yes, thank you. Okay, I'll call the roll. Lindsay,
Yes.
Jen,
Yes.
Susanna,
Yes.
Angela,
Yes.
Beth,
Yes.
I vote yes. Michelle,
Yes.
Vali,
Yes.
Maddie,
Yes.
Brady had to take off, Jeremy,
Yes.
and Candy.
Yes.
Great, thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank you, Cynthia. Okay, 15A, personnel.
Yes, tonight I'm putting forth to you the following personnel. All of our educators that are going on a second-year probationary contract. You also have the ones who are going on a third-year probationary contract. And then the last column are the educators that will be moving to a continuing contract. And just for your information, this will be our last year of having third-year probationary contracts. And after that, because of the change in state law, there will only be 2 years of probation for teachers.
Okay, do folks have any questions or comments? Is there a motion for consideration and approval to accept the nomination of the following personnel and to authorize the superintendent of schools to issue contracts for the 2021-2022 school year? Listed below. Beth, Vali. I will call the roll. Jen? Yes. Susanna?
Yes.
Angela? Beth?
Yes.
I vote yes. Michelle?
Yes.
Vali?
Yes.
Maddie?
Yes.
Jeremy?
Yes.
Candy?
Yes.
And Lindsay?
Yes.
Great, thanks, everyone. Whoops, sorry about that. Okay, item 15B. Or actually, unless anyone has an objection or would like to take any of these separately, Becky will go through and describe each of these individually, and then we'll take one vote for them together. So are folks okay with taking B through G together in one motion? Okay, I guess I'll take the motion first. Do I have a motion for consideration and approval to employ a classroom teacher at Moore Street School, a 7th, 8th grade science teacher at Durham Community School, a 1st grade teacher at Durham Community School, a 4th grade teacher at Durham Community School, a .8 STEM RTI teacher at Mass Landing School for 1 year only, just this one, and a social studies teacher at Freeport High School for the 2021-2022 school year. Vali, Maddie, thank you. And I'll turn it over to Becky.
Thank you, Mark. So I'm happy to recommend Amy Eisenhard as the kindergarten teacher at Moore Street. Amy has a bachelor's from Appalachian State University in North Carolina. She's currently working in Guatemala. And one of her references noted, Amy quickly develops a wonderful rapport with students, and this connection enables her students to achieve their best. Her teaching style is engaging and challenging. Scoop her up. She is a phenomenal teacher who loves and cares about the kids in her class. For the 7-8 science teacher at Durham Community School, I'm delighted to recommend Amanda Sami as the 7-8 science teacher. She comes to us with a bachelor's from Tufts and a master's from Harvard. She has 4 years of experiences. One of her references said she dives into her work dedicated to the core. As much as she expects from her students, she expects more of herself. She brought in students from Bowdoin to lead many lessons, led geological field work, trained students how to gather data, and worked with the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife to track a heron. We're thrilled to welcome Amanda to DCS. I'm also happy to recommend Abby Skelton as a first grade teacher at DCS. She comes to us with the bachelor's from Gordon College and a master's from UMO. She has 15 years of experience, and most recently she has been working in Auburn. One of her references states, Abby is a gifted educator who strives to ensure that her students experience success on an educational, emotional, and social level. She approaches daily challenges as an opportunity to teach them how to use their strengths to support their new learning. She has a wealth of knowledge in all aspects of literacy instruction. I'm also happy to recommend Emily Shute as a fourth grade teacher at DCS. She comes to us with the bachelor's from St. Petersburg. She has 5 years of experience, most recently working in Florida. One of her references states, Emily excels in putting data-focused best practices in place, always with the intention of helping each of her students to grow and meet their potential. She was nominated to be one of 3 select teachers to participate in a Math Leadership Institute. I would rehire her in a heartbeat. Any school who gains her as a teacher has hit the jackpot. So we're excited to welcome Emily to DCS. And then I'm thrilled to recommend Christine McDonald as the STEM teacher at MLS. She comes to us with the bachelor's from Baylor University in Texas and with the master's from Texas A&M. Love to have another Texan on board. She has 3 years of experience, most recently working at MLS. She has done an outstanding job this year filling in for Gail Wolotsky, who has transitioned to the Director of Technology. These were not easy shoes to fill, but Christy has stepped up to the challenge. And so we're excited to have her continue there at MLS. And then lastly, I'm thrilled to recommend Jacob Willett as a social studies teacher at FHS. He comes to us with the bachelor's from UMO. He's in his first year. He's right now filling in for Rachel Olson here at Freeport High School. He's done an outstanding job. He has an amazing ability to connect quickly with our students. And in his second interview, we had a wonderful conversation about how he helps students to discern facts from opinion by using multiple resources. He feels passionately about having our students become critical readers. And so we're excited to have Jake continue to be part of the FHS staff. Thank you.
Jen.
So Becky, I just want to say that how grateful I think that we are that you do so much of this hiring so early. You know, quick, terrible math of mine, 81 people applying for 6 spots is phenomenal. And to then see also someone that, you know, filled in to get hired as a permanent is also something that speaks to, you know, you get to kind of test somebody out, and then when they meet that high bar, I mean, that's huge. I just know from a lot of my friends that are teachers that schools aren't even starting to hire yet. So I feel so confident that we have gotten some really fantastic teachers, and appreciate that.
I echo that. I can't imagine how much work this was, and to find such great folks is fabulous. Any other questions or comments, folks online? Okay, I'll call the roll. Jen? Yes. Susanna?
Did you call me? Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Angela?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
I vote yes. Michelle?
Yes.
Vali?
Yes.
Maddie?
Yes.
Jeremy?
Yes.
Candy?
Yes.
And Lindsay?
Yes.
Great, thanks everyone.
So Maura, I have a question for Becky, quick, about interview teams. How are we doing that this year with the pandemic? Are community members, parents, everyone being invited the same as always, just doing remotely, or has anything changed?
Really, it's just a matter of whether we're doing them via Zoom or having them in person. And even with my second interviews, I've had some of both. Sometimes the candidate really wants to come in, but as you can see from the last few meetings, we've hired a lot of people from out of state, so we're doing Zoom. But no, I mean, overall, we're still having some model lessons done by some teachers in some, interviews and still having students and parents involved.
Sorry, you're still advertising, looking for candidates to be part of interview teams, as we always have done. I'm just asking because I don't recall having seen any letters go out that I have received inviting community members to participate.
I can't speak to specifically how they choose their parents, but I'm happy to ask the principals and then just provide that in a board update. I think sometimes if it's like a fourth grade teacher, they're probably reaching out to a parent that's in that particular group, but I'm really speaking how I've done it in the past, but I'm happy to follow up with that.
Thank you.
Okay, we are at our last public comment period for the evening. Do we have anyone online, Jen?
We do have one yes, but may not have their hand up, so if they would like to comment, just to use
Okay, just a reminder to anyone on Zoom to use the raise hand function if you would like to make a comment. We'll just give 1 second to let you find that. Okay, in that case, I would take a motion for consideration and approval to enter into executive session as outlined in 1 MRSA 4056A for the purpose of discussing the superintendent's evaluation. Sally, Maddie. And I'll call the roll. Susanna?
Yes.
Angela? Beth?
Yes.
I vote yes. Michelle?
Yes.
Vali?
Yes.
Maddie?
Yes.
Jeremy?
Yes.
Candy?
Yes.
Lindsay?
Yes.
And Jen? Okay, thank you, everyone. Take a short break. Oh, and yes, I'll need your purple folders. Yeah, you can take everything out. I'm not sure, do folks need to give back their orange? Oh.
Yes.
Yep, Ginny told me that I should take them at the end. Okay. Got it. So folks will have to put things back in here at the end. Okay.